Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Raise.dev Hacktoberfest Help Desk. My name is Joe, and I'm the community manager here at Raise.dev. You are tuning in for our last stream of the day. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are new to the stream, the Raise.dev Hacktoberfest Help Desk is your place to get help with all things Raise.dev during the month of October. Today, we've got a special guest who I'll be introducing shortly. We're going to be talking about their career today. We might get around to doing a little bit of Laravel, looking at an old Laravel app. Chris Hunt, I see you in the chat. You were talking about Laravel the other day. This one is for you. So we're going to be doing a little bit of Laravel with our guest today as well. But before that, a couple of things. For those of you in the chat, please chat along. You are super welcome to ask questions, to ask anything of our guest, to ask anything about your Hacktoberfest contributions and the problems that you are facing. Anything like that, super welcome and highly encouraged. One warning though, whilst we do love it when you post links to what you're working on or to relevant blog posts, all that kind of stuff, we do have a moderation bot in the chat. So if you want to post a link, just at me at RaiseDevs. So that I've just put a demonstration in the chat. Drop me a message at RaiseDevs so that I can permit you to post links so that you don't get timed out by our mod bot, because no one likes to be timed out by the mod bot. So just drop me that warning as and when. It does look like my camera's a little bit choppy. Sorry if my quality is low. Hopefully that will calm down. So the other things for me to go through, if you have any questions this Hacktoberfest, you're trying to get started with open source or you're stuck on a particular issue, you can submit your questions to us on the Raise.dev Hacktoberfest help desk at Raise.dev Hacktoberfest. When you submit a question, we review that question and get it to one of our expert guests who can help you with your problem. We answer that question here live on the show and then send you the recording after. It could not be easier, and you get all of your questions answered. So you can submit questions to Raise.dev Hacktoberfest. And we are on this show 3 times a day, every day in October. And you can find our full schedule for the week at twitch.tv RaiseDev's schedule. At the end of the show, I'll give you a little bit of a teaser on what's coming up the rest of the week. This is our last show today. We'll be back tomorrow with 3 more shows. So you can find out about those at twitch.tv RaiseDev's schedule, or you can find out at the end of this show. Also, just a reminder to get notifications about when we go live, when the shows go live, because it is 3 times a day, and that is a lot to keep track of. You can follow us here on Twitch. If you hit the love heart, once you do that, that will not give you notifications. You also then need to hit the little bell as well. So hit the love heart, then hit the bell to get notifications. You can also follow us at Twitter, on Twitter at RaiseDevs, where we also tweet regularly about all of the shows that are going live, so you can keep up with what is happening and when, most importantly. So that's almost everything from me. The final thing is, who are Raise.dev? What are we doing here? Why are we doing this show? Raise.dev is a service to help you level up in your developer career, whether you're trying to get your first job, fresh out of school, fresh out of boot camp, fresh out of a career change, whatever it is, or you're trying to get your second job, you're trying to get a promotion, you're trying to get a raise, whatever it is, we are here to help you get ahead. You can sign up for a coaching session with one of our expert coaches today for free at raise.dev. Whilst you're in early access, we are completely free. Advanced warning, there is a little bit of a wait list right now. Don't be scared. We will match you with a coach. It just will take a little bit longer than we'd like. We're working on it. We're bringing on new coaches on all the time. We met another new coach today, actually. It's very exciting. They joined our team call. Great stuff. So you'll get to meet them soon. You can sign up at raise.dev. So that's something for me. Let's bring on our guest for the day. Please welcome Anand to the stream. Hi, Anand. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
There we go. Yeah, it's great. Thanks. Yeah, would you like to introduce yourself to the viewers?
Yeah, my name's Anand. Right now I'm a senior engineer at HashiCorp. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. So as I kind of said to begin with, we're going to start talking about your career, and then maybe we'll get into some Laravel if we get around to it. But I wanted to talk about your career first of all, because as you said, you're a senior engineer at HashiCorp, but you've also like the laundry list of companies you've been through on the way here, and also job titles is really interesting. So one of the things we like to do on this show is kind of lay the path out for folks who are kind of new and starting out their tech careers about the options available to them. And I think you've managed to tick off a lot of those boxes on the way through. So I guess let's start with like, where was your entry into like software engineering? Like, how did your career start?
Yeah, so, it started a long time ago. I don't really know when I was really young, I was always super interested in computers. I remember like my dad's not a software engineer or anything. He's an industrial engineer actually, but I remember just like sitting on his lap and just watching him like do stuff on the computer. And I was always like super fascinated by computers. And eventually I got my own laptop And I did what any kid would do is, I took the whole thing apart, almost
Right.
broke it. My parents got mad at me. I installed I think I uninstalled Windows, installed DOS on it for like no good reason.
Perfect.
Just messed around. I was always
Yeah.
just like experimenting with stuff, messing around, like tinkering, breaking tons of things probably that I shouldn't have, but
Right.
it's all learning experience.
For sure.
And so then that's when I started kind of learning about programming and
Hmm.
kind of seeing how you could write code and then
Hmm.
actually get the computer to do something that you want it to do.
Right.
And I thought that was really cool that I could actually like write code and like make programs and
Hmm.
that did whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
Um, and so that just like really interested me, and I started there and just kept
Right.
learning.
That's awesome. Do you remember what your first like programming language was, or what it was that first prompted you to write code?
Pretty sure it was like basic,
Interesting.
like
Cool.
yeah. Um, and then I started playing around with PHP.
Right.
Then I started doing like C Sharp .NET
Hmm.
stuff,
Hmm.
messed around with Ruby a little bit,
Right.
um, played with Node.
Cool.
Um, then I moved over to doing stuff in Go. Like I've kind of experimented with a lot of
Yeah, for
languages.
sure. Yeah, I think once you get
Yeah.
into the industry, it's fairly normal to
Hmm.
use whatever the current company uses, whatever you're encouraged to use. You've got someone in chat who I'm guessing is one of the friends that you mentioned, who's saying you better know what etcd is.
Oh man.
Hi, welcome to chat. Oh my god, Luke from Vonish just gifted a sub. Luke, that is our first subscription on this here channel, which is newly affiliated. Thank you so much for that. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted by excitement from the fact we have subscriptions now. As you have been at a lot of companies that people will be familiar with. You've worked at
I
Microsoft, you
have,
worked at
yes.
Amazon, you've worked at Blizzard. Talk to us about that journey. Like,
Yeah,
where did that start for all those great companies?
sure. So, I started I had my own company when I was in high school. Me and one of my friends, we had like a web hosting company. We did like web hosting. We had like some services like cPanel on it, and we were doing
Right.
web hosting. Then we started doing like programming for people, and we were doing like sort of like this consulting thing. Um, and then I went to college. I went to Ohio State,
Yeah.
and I was like working on this kind of startup thing, and it was going kind of well. I raised money, um, and then I decided to basically drop out of school and work on it.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, and that kind of worked, kind of didn't work.
Right. What
Maybe
work? So I guess like when you say it kind of worked, what didn't work, kind of didn't work. I'm guessing what didn't work is the startup, but what did
yeah,
work
this
is
is
like
true.
things you learned along the way, because that's usually the way this goes.
Yeah, right. I learned a ton. Learned a lot about sort of other things like how to raise money and
Yeah.
for a startup and things like that.
Right.
Um, and then basically like I was like, look, this is cool, but I don't think this is gonna like work out super well. So
Right.
um, then I basically was like, okay, what do I do? Like, how do I get
Yeah.
a job? So basically I you know a lot of it is just networking. So
Yeah.
um, basically, I had like a bunch of friends at OSU, and a lot of them went and they were working at Microsoft or Amazon or places like that. And so I kind of hit some of them up and got an interview at Microsoft, and then I interned there
Yeah.
for the summer.
Cool.
And then I basically was like, look, I'm not going back to school, so is there any way I can like work here
Yeah.
full time?
I've
Um,
done literally that. That's how the poor folks at PayPal got stuck with me.
and so they were like, I mean, maybe. And then it was like this weird, like I was like, 'cause they were like, look, you did really well. Like we want to have you back next summer. And I was like, can I come back next month?
Right.
And so they were like, okay, let's see. They made me do like a full interview loop again, which you don't usually have to do if you're coming back as an
Yeah.
intern or even full time when you graduate. So I did a full interview loop again as if I was applying for a full-time job.
Hmm.
Um, Went through that, and then they hired me full-time, um, without a college degree or anything like that. So
Nice.
it's possible with, and I had like no experience, right? Um,
Right.
Except for like this startup that we
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
do
yeah.
too well at,
So
and
what were you working on
yeah,
there at that time?
at Microsoft.
Yeah.
So I interned at Bing, in
Right.
it was called Bing Local, and so that was sort
Uh-huh.
of like all of the local experiences on Bing. So that included like, let's say, maps. It included like if you search for a restaurant and it starts showing you like restaurants and things nearby, all that kind of stuff.
Right. Right,
To
right.
sort of like experiences and things near you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so I worked on like some different sort of just generic stuff there when I interned.
Hmm.
Um, like a restaurant carousel experience and stuff like that. And then after that, then I was working on the local auto suggest API. So that's basically like, I mean, the easiest
Yeah.
way to explain it is on Google Maps. When you're typing in an address, a place, like, a business name, whatever, and that auto suggest you get, that, but for Bing Maps.
Hmm.
So I was the program manager for that API and service,
Hmm.
which was really cool. It's like actually a really hard problem to solve. Normal autocomplete is actually
Hmm.
not as hard, or auto
Right.
suggest is not as hard as Maps auto suggest, because with like just regular web auto suggest, you're just
Hmm.
searching like for these sort of, you're like trying to autocomplete like these keywords and phrases and things, but it's all very,
Right.
it's all the same, like no matter who's
Yeah.
typing.
Hmm.
But with local auto suggest, if you type in McDonald's, you're going to want the McDonald's near you. And if I type in
Right.
McDonald's, I'm going to want the McDonald's near me. So you
Uh-huh.
actually have to include that element of location into
Right.
your suggestions as well. And this is all in a service that needs to respond in milliseconds. Otherwise,
Hmm. Hmm.
if I type out the whole McDonald's and the
Right.
suggestion finally pops up, like that's not very helpful, right? You've already typed out
Hmm.
everything you
Hmm.
wanted. Um, so
Interesting.
that was a super cool problem.
Yeah.
But I was just like not super excited about mapping and sort of like maps
Right.
and that kind of stuff. It just wasn't really what excited me.
Hmm.
Um, so after that, I went to Amazon, and I was a technical program manager there.
Cool.
And so at Amazon, I helped launch like new payment methods and
Hmm.
experiences
Hmm.
for um, digital ordering. So at Amazon, things are kind of separated. So
Yeah.
you don't notice it as much in the US because we
Right.
basically only pay with a credit card or a debit card, which is the same thing,
Yeah.
um, or a bank account maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's pretty much the only ways you can pay for something, right, in the US online.
Right.
But in other countries, you've got tons of other ways that they pay, whether it's
Yeah.
just like an equivalent of something that we have here, like, instead of ACH, like in Canada, they have like Interac, which is a million times
Yeah.
better than what we have. But
Yeah.
other countries, they have things like you can pay with your cell phone bill. So
Yeah.
you text a number, they charge you, it goes on your cell phone bill, and you pay it at the end of the month, or it comes out of your balance that you have. I don't know if anyone remembers. I was probably, I feel like anyone younger than me will have no clue what this is. But back when like I first got a cell phone,
Sure.
you could like text that number and get like ringtones and
Oh, I
backgrounds
definitely
for your
remember doing
phone
that.
and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, right?
And
And
you'd
so
get
that
like the
was
big like listings of like the codes you had to text to get different ringtones
exactly.
at the back of
Yep.
magazines and stuff. Yeah, I
Yep.
100% remember
And
that.
then you
Yeah.
do it and the $2
Yeah.
charge would show up and your parents would yell at you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
but
good.
this is also like,
Um,
I mean, and there's a part of this where I suspect we're going to end up doing some payment nerdery because, like, as you said in your bio that you're big into payments, and I spent a little bit of time doing payments. But like, this is
yeah,
still a big way of paying for things in like a lot of countries, like
exactly.
African countries, for example. There's
Hmm.
a lot where like a lot of the banking system is still done via like paying via cell phone credit.
Exactly.
And so it's still like a super big system. And also on that like countries with weird payment systems thing, as you maybe had to tell my background, I'm in the Netherlands, which has its own one of a kind payment system called Ideal, which is all
Yep.
like QR code powered that Amazon recently added. So yeah, I imagine there's a lot. This must be a very complicated thing to set
Yeah,
up.
totally. And so, um, with like carrier billing and things
Yeah.
like that didn't catch on here, but it's super popular
Right.
in other places. And so what's interesting at Amazon is the sort of ordering like workflows
Yeah.
and pipelines for digital and retail orders. So
Mhm.
digital is anything that's not shipped to you, and
Mhm.
retail is anything that's shipped to you. So
Right.
if you order something and it shows up in the mail, or UPS,
That's
whatever,
retail.
that is retail. And
Mhm.
anything like a Prime subscription, a Kindle book, a video, anything like that, a video game, those are all digital, which are delivered to you digitally.
I see.
And so the whole sort of workflow and everything is different for that. Um, Mainly because when the retail pipeline was built at Amazon,
Mhm.
there was no need for it to be fast.
Mhm.
They needed to be able to receive your order and get it to the warehouse, but
Mhm.
the payment sort of flow wasn't important. So
Right.
as long as they charged you before the order left the warehouse, it was fine, right?
Cool.
And the orders
Generally
don't
a good thing
leave.
to do when you're shipping goods. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, they don't leave, 5 minutes after you've ordered, right? Like they're
Right.
gonna leave. I
Yeah.
mean, probably back when this was built. I mean, I don't even know if they left the same day.
Yeah.
Um, and so then they had to sort of build this whole new workflow engine for digital orders, which were instant
Right.
because you can't buy an ebook or a movie and see a message that says,
Have it
"Hey, yeah,
shipped
you'll
to you in
you'll
a
receive
while. Yeah.
your
Yeah.
movie in 1 to 2 days," and you're like, "What?
Yeah.
I want to watch this
Yeah.
now."
And even to be
Um,
fair, like now with retail orders, like you can place the order on Amazon and get like an email within 10 minutes that it's shipped. Like it's pretty wild.
exactly, yeah. So obviously those systems had to get
Yeah.
caught up, but until they did that, the digital system was built for that reason.
Hmm.
And because of that, the actual payment methods and sort of payment processing stuff are separate. So,
Hmm.
so my team, we were only adding payment methods and stuff for digital orders.
Hmm.
So what was interesting is if you were to buy like a Kindle book, you might see different payment methods available to you in the country you're in than if you were to buy
Huh.
like a product.
I imagine that
Um,
must have caused a lot of friction in certain ways.
yeah, it's a little bit confusing, but they've been
Yeah.
unifying it, so it's
Okay.
it's much better now. But that was what
Cool.
what I worked on. So I helped launch like carrier billing in Japan.
Hmm.
You could charge your phone bill in Japan. We started working on carrier billing in China right
Hmm.
before I left, and WeChat was launching in China for Amazon right around the time I joined as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
Those are
Awesome.
some of the things I worked on
Yeah.
at Amazon.
Super
Um,
cool.
yeah,
Neat. And so
then
your
oh
role
yeah,
there, sorry to jump in, so your role was technical program manager, which is
yeah,
we had a couple of program managers on the show, but it's tend to be in like the DevRel capacity. So I'd like to hear a little bit about like what your day to day actually looked like at that role, kind of again in the spirit of like showing folks who are early in their kind of technical careers that there is like a wide breadth of stuff that's not just software engineering.
yeah. So I was a program manager at Microsoft as well, and what's interesting about the role is
Yeah.
you can do it at different companies, and it's totally different between every company. Um, right? You could be a program manager at one company and do one thing, and
Hmm.
be a program
Hmm.
manager at a different company and do a totally
Hmm.
different thing.
Hmm.
So you kind of have to, if you're getting into the role, you kind of have to see like what that company is looking for and if that
Right.
interests you or not.
Right.
Um, and so at Microsoft, a program manager is like kind of like usually more like a product manager, like they kind of own a product end to end and are
Hmm.
responsible for the whole thing. And there aren't as many product managers at Microsoft.
Hmm.
Whereas at Amazon there are. So there's technical program managers and there's product managers, and so the product managers kind of define like the vision, what the product should be. They'll work with customers on sort of what the experience should look like, what we should
Hmm.
build,
Hmm.
and then the TPM is sort of responsible for like executing that. So
Right.
the TPM is sort of there to manage like the day-to-day execution of like driving
Sure.
this project to completion
Cool.
and
Right.
sort of doing
Yeah.
anything you have to do to get it done.
Right, right. So, yeah, this is very similar to a product manager, but with something that's, I guess, like hard to pin into the usual definition of a product and slightly wider in
Right.
scope as a project. It's like the differentiation between like product, project, and program, I think, is a very confusing set of
Yeah, it can be
delineations.
confusing, and some
Yeah,
companies use them interchangeably, some don't,
yeah,
so it gets confusing.
cool.
But usually, like TPMs are like
Yeah,
more embedded in engineering teams,
sure.
and they work more closely with engineers, and they have usually they may not know how to write code well, but they
Right.
usually understand a little bit about software development at a minimum.
Sure, sure. Okay. I interrupt you, sorry. So you're moving on from Amazon.
Yes. Then I went to a smaller company called Tango Card, and
Oh,
they have an API for gift cards basically. So
oh,
if you
cool.
want to run like a rewards program or an incentive program, like
Hmm.
if you've ever done like a survey and it was like, hey, take the survey, we'll give you a
And
five
get
dollar
some time.
Starbucks
Yeah,
gift card.
right,
You can use basically like the API, like Tango Card's API, to then
right.
deliver that gift card to whoever needs it. And so there, I was a senior TPM there. I was basically the only one. So
Hmm.
I basically ran all the like consumer facing products at the company.
Yeah.
So that was basically like Reward Link, which is this product where you could, instead of sending someone a specific gift card, you could send them a
Yeah.
link,
Okay.
and then they would see this like catalog of gift cards, and they could choose,
Right.
mix and match gift cards, whatever. It's like, hey, you got $50. Like, what do you want? And you're like, okay, I want
Yeah.
like 25 to Amazon and 10 to Starbucks or whatever. Um, and I owned like just like a couple other products like Rewards Genius and Blast Rewards and stuff. So those
Yeah.
were like sort of portals to
Cool.
order gift cards in bulk and things like
Yeah.
that.
I'm grinning like an idiot right now because I've just gone to the Tango Cards documentation and seen
Yeah.
that their API is called Rewards as a Service, as in like a play on
Hmm.
SaaS, which is
Yep.
wonderful. And also they've trademarked it, which is an additional
Hmm.
level of like
It was
joy.
hanging on
That's
the wall,
yeah,
the paperwork.
that's so good. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I guess this is like as we kind of touched on that, like in your bio, you said you care a lot about payments. So I guess this was like the start of like kind of doing it at Amazon is one thing, and this is the start where you start to really hone your career on that area, I guess.
Yeah, and the startup I had was payments as well.
Mm,
So
cool, neat. Okay,
started
right.
there, kept
Yeah,
growing.
yeah,
Then after that, then I went to Lyft.
right.
So that was interesting. I moved to San Francisco
Yeah,
to work at Lyft, and I helped launch Lyft Direct, which
uh-huh.
is basically a bank account and debit card for drivers.
Okay.
And it's super cool because it's a fee-free bank account and debit card,
Hmm.
and almost anyone who's a Lyft driver can get it. Like there's
Hmm.
like eligibility requirements are super easy. So a lot of
Hmm.
people who are underbanked or underserved in the financial services sort of sector can actually
Hmm.
get this card. And what was cool about it, or I guess still is cool about it, is you get cashback rewards on the debit card as well. So when you're spending money with your debit card, you're actually getting cash back, which is like
Interesting.
very unheard of for debit cards.
Hmm.
And on top of that, every time you finish a ride on Lyft, so like as soon as you drop off the passenger and you say ride completed, within about 20, 30 seconds, in reality it was like 2 seconds, but we
Hmm.
said 20 to 30, the money would be in your bank account and you could spend it for that ride.
Neat. Nice. That's awesome.
So like if you wanted to, did a ride and you wanted to go get coffee, like you could
Yeah,
literally buy a coffee with the money you just earned for that ride.
that's super cool. Yeah,
Um, and so that
yeah.
was that was super cool.
That's really different to like how a lot of these services work, where it tends to be like it will pay out either on a fixed period or it will pay out like
Right.
once you reach a certain minimum,
Hmm.
which makes, as you said, like doing things like, oh, hey, I just want to do this one-off ride because I've got
Right.
like a spare cycle between going to a doctor's appointment or something, which was like meant to be like the original dream of the rideshare apps, right? Before it turned everyone just onto
Hmm.
the endless gig uh, economy
Yeah, that
wheel.
was
Yeah.
that's an interesting like aspect of it, because we did research, and so this product was part of like the sort of driver like wellness, driver financial wellness, like sort of initiatives that Lyft was
Hmm.
taking to work
Yeah.
on. I don't know what's out and what's not out anymore, so I won't talk about what we were working on,
Yeah, for sure. That's a wise choice.
but I mean, basically, they want to help drivers sort of be in a good position financially. So this was
Yeah.
part of that, sort of as like a foundational element. Like we did surveys and things, and like drivers were trying to get paid out on like prepaid cards they got from Walmart. Like
Mm-hmm.
they'd get a gift card that was a credit card, like a debit, prepaid gift card. And they're like, can I cash out my money onto this card, right? And they're like, because they're from other countries, they don't
Yeah.
have history in the U.S. Maybe they've made a mistake, and they got their bank account closed or whatever,
Right.
and now no one will give them a bank account. And
Yeah.
so now they're like in this weird situation where you can't even have a bank account, and
Yeah.
so how are you supposed to get paid? What like where do you go from here?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of the main reasons we built the product was to help those drivers. And you
Right.
hear stories like, you'll literally hear stories like we talked to some people, and one person told us, she
Mm-hmm.
was like, I don't have, I basically live paycheck to paycheck. I have no
Yeah.
money in my bank account at any time. And she was like, with Lyft, um, so before Lyft Direct, we had like, it's still there. We've Lyft like Instant Pay, I think
Yeah.
it's called.
Right.
And so that one, or no, sorry, Instant Pay is the debit card. It's called Express Pay. And
Right.
Express Pay, you can cash out like onto your debit card if you have a bank account or whatever, and there's like a small fee, but then you can get the money like pretty quickly,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to pay a fee for it. And
I see.
so um, she told us, she was like, look, I didn't have enough money to get dinner for my family. So I
Right.
went out and drove for a couple hours and did express pay and then used that money to buy groceries for my family.
Wow.
And so things like that, like if we can make
Yeah.
that even easier for people, that was sort of the driving factor behind it. So
Yeah.
with this product, it was like, okay, you don't have to pay any fees. The money's in there instantly. You can spend it however you want. And on groceries and things, there's cash back as well. I think
Mhm.
it's groceries, gas, and restaurants were the cash back categories. So that
That's
was super cool
fascinating. That's really
to
like
work on.
I wouldn't have. Well, I mean, I didn't have any idea that like Lyft had like those services like that, like debit card. It's really crossing the line into. I can't remember who originally said this, but Swift from MLH. I've heard him quote it that like every company eventually becomes a bank, but it's very much crossing into that line, which is yeah, super fascinating. Um, cool. So I guess after Lyft, it was Blizzard.
That's
And
right.
as I
Yep.
tweeted, and I think you saw, I have many questions about this one.
Probably can't answer a lot of them. Otherwise, like I think
That's
my stream will
fine.
just disconnect and I'll like disappear off the face of the earth. So,
That's totally
um,
fine. I'll withhold my my Jeff Kaplan questions.
um, but yeah, at Blizzard, so I joined Blizzard as a senior product manager,
Right.
um, and I ran basically the checkout and at Blizzard, sort of like I worked at BattleNet, which is sort of the like online services
Now I'm even
division of
more
Blizzard.
excited. Yeah.
And so like the different pieces of BattleNet were like products. And so
Right.
I owned like the checkout and subscriptions products.
Uh-huh.
So I owned like the whole like checkout experience end to end, which included like some of like the sort of product eligibility, like oh, if you own Overwatch, can you
Right.
upgrade to the Legendary Edition? If
Yeah.
can you can get it for like the upgrade price, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The actual whole checkout flow, like adding what's called an entitlement to your account, which is like basically like a game license,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, and then subscriptions, which were similar but with a different workflow, which is where you
Sure.
buy a WoW subscription and you
Right.
have access to the game while your subscription's active. And so I owned like both those products, like
Mhm.
end to end. And that was for all Blizzard titles as well as like
Right.
Modern Warfare.
Right. And that must have been I think partly why I'm really interested in this is like Blizzard are somewhat famous, infamous, a mix of between for like inventing several game commercialization models. And when were you there? I guess you were probably there at like when Blizzard basically invented the definition of modern loot boxes. If you were there during the Overwatch period.
So this was not too long ago. So it
Okay.
was back in like October. I wasn't there for too long actually, but
Cool. Okay.
yeah, back like just end of last year, beginning of this year was when I
Okay.
was
So
there.
cool. So you would have missed
Yeah.
the invention of loot boxes. But yeah, like they have like I imagine that must have had like so many interesting ins and outs with like
It's a
when and
very
how people
complicated
pay. Right.
commerce platform.
Yeah.
Not even
Because
just about like when and how you pay, but
yeah.
the whole sort of just data model
Mm-hmm.
for like e-commerce basically, because
Mm-hmm.
you've got tons of different like licenses and entitlements.
Right.
Like you might buy Overwatch, but you're not actually
Right.
only getting Overwatch, let's say,
You're
like
getting
added
like
to your account.
skins if you have the legendary edition,
Yeah,
right?
and so
Yeah.
like you buy the Legendary Edition, you get
Yeah.
entitlements for skins, or there's
Yeah.
like promotional things where like oh you get this for a limited time when you buy it,
Right.
and then on top of that you've got regions, so the
Right.
games can be played in different regions. At Blizzard, like there's a lot of cross-region
Mm-hmm.
play, so if you buy Overwatch in the US, you can still
Mm-hmm.
play on servers in other countries
Right.
if you want to. When you open the game or before
Yeah.
you open the game, you can pick from the drop down and
Which is
say, "Oh,
not
I want
only
to
something
play."
that you can do, but it's something that like the pro community for Overwatch, for example, actively relies on because you can't get a high ranked queue in some regions, and so you
Right.
have to queue in the West Coast, right?
Yeah. And so with that, it was like, okay, so now you've got this sort of really complicated system where
Right.
the data is actually stored in different regions. So like
Interesting.
US players, their data is stored in the US. Like North
Right.
American, right, is stored in the US. But if you go
Yeah.
to Europe, there's their data stored in Europe. If you go to
Right.
Japan, I think their data is stored in Japan, and sort of the
Yeah.
APAC, some of the APAC stuff stored in
Right.
Japan. And so it's like now it's like, okay, I'm trying to log in. I have a US account, but I'm trying to log into the Korean server, and the
Right.
Korean servers have no clue who I am.
Right.
So the Korean servers actually go to the North American server and say, "Hey, who is this person? Do you know them? And they're like, oh yeah, they got Overwatch, like it's all good. And then they're like, okay, cool, they can play. But
Right.
you've got to sort of now account for these sort of cross region and just all kinds of complexities there. And then also multi-currency, right? So if you live in Canada, you're going to pay in Canadian dollars. If you live in Korea, you're going to pay in Korean dollars. Um, Differences, for example, in like WoW subscriptions. So in
Mhm.
some countries, you can't buy a subscription; you buy game time.
Right.
So every time you want to play, you're like, okay, I want to buy 30 days, and then that gets added to your account. When it expires, you actually have to go and buy another 30 days or add a card or something.
Yeah.
Whereas like in the US, you can just subscribe.
Is WoW has WoW joined the other MMOs where like there are ways in game to earn game time as well through
Yeah,
like
there
game
is
mechanisms? Cool,
WoW.
right?
I believe it's called tokens,
Okay.
which you can earn and sell
Yeah.
in game.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I imagine is again extra complexity in terms of like
hmm
juggling, like adding that
Yeah, that's
as a time
complexity
is
because you
also a
can
gameplay
redeem
feature.
those, and that
Yeah.
gets converted into game time.
Right.
And the WoW tokens aren't in the sort of WoW like inventory system, but then
Yeah.
when they redeem them, those become an
They
entitlement in like our system that I owned, and so it
fascinating.
gets complicated,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's really cool. Um,
Nice.
yeah.
Cool. So yeah, from there, I think which is that brings us up to date. That next was HashiCorp.
Yep, that's where I work
Awesome.
now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Wicked. So HashiCorp, for those who aren't familiar with HashiCorp, and I think I first really became familiar with HashiCorp during a GitHub Universe keynote. But for those who haven't encountered it before, what is HashiCorp? Like, what is it that HashiCorp does?
We do a lot of stuff. We have quite a few products now.
Yeah.
I think we have like 4 commercial products and then a couple products that are only open source.
Yeah.
But we basically build like software to help with like infrastructure. So
Hmm.
infrastructure like provisioning, securing your infrastructure, connecting different pieces of your infrastructure. We help with all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and so we have like different products. So a lot of people will know Terraform. So Terraform is sort of our product where you can almost define your infrastructure as code. So you've got
Right.
like a Terraform file, and there you'll define like, okay, I want a load balancer. If you're using AWS, like I want like an ELB, I
Right.
want like an EC2, or if you want an auto scaling group, whatever, right? And you can sort of define all that stuff in these files, and then you can run a command which will then sort of compare your infrastructure to what the files say it should be or like what you want it to be, and it'll tell you what changes it's going to make.
Right.
And then after that, then you can say, okay, like go ahead and execute it. And it'll execute sort of this plan that it told you. And it
Hmm.
sort of makes sure that any changes you're making to your infrastructure, you actually know what's happening. Um, so for example, like in the AWS console, like you can go and like change a bunch of settings on like your load balancer, right? And
Right.
then your coworker is like, I need to spin up a second environment. And he's like, okay, what do we have? Like a load balancer and like a couple EC2 instances? Cool. I'm just going to go make a new load balancer, go make some EC2 instances.
Right.
Why isn't this working? And it's because, the person who set up the first one had to configure some random settings that may or may not even be available in the console, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
I know for some like header, like IP rewriting stuff back in the old like ELBs, like you could only do it through the AWS CLI, and like
Hmm.
there was
Hmm.
no way to know if you enable that setting or not other than like checking it through the CLI.
Yeah.
And so stuff like that, right? Like how do you even know that someone set that up?
Right.
And with something like Terraform, you can that's all defined in your sort of Terraform files, right? And so
Right.
now if you want to clone your infrastructure, it's obviously not as simple, but you can basically just like copy and paste the file and deploy a new
Right.
copy.
Yeah.
Um, so it's super cool. And then Terraform also helps a lot with multi-cloud. So if you want to do
Hmm.
AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, deploy stuff across multiple clouds, you can sort of manage all of that in Terraform and not have to worry about dealing with each cloud's like individual tool. Like AWS has Cloud Formation and Azure has
Yeah.
ARM and Google has can't remember what Google's is called, but you don't want
Everyone
to deal with all
invents
that,
conflict.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, for
Exactly.
sure.
And so it's like you can just have it all there. And it's super cool. And then it also just makes sure that the changes you're making to your infrastructure are the ones you want to make. So
Right.
if I go to like replace a load balancer, or let's say like an EC2 instance, and I go ahead and change that in my Terraform file and I say I want to run it, it's going to tell me, okay, to do this, we have to destroy your EC2 instance, make a new one, and like here's what's going to get destroyed. Are you sure that's
Right.
cool? And then you say, yeah, that's cool. And if anything changes in between the time it told you, like, hey, this is what I'm going to do, right before it goes to do it, it'll tell
Mhm.
you, okay, I can't do this anymore because what I told you I'm going to do is not what I can do anymore. So you need to rerun the plan so you
Jesus.
know
Okay.
what's going on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want it to go destroying stuff that you don't even know, right? And
Right.
that can
Right.
happen when you're just like clicking around in the console, like you delete an
Yeah.
EC2 instance, and now like your EBS is deleted too, and now all your data's
Right.
gone, and you're just like, oh, what? Like, okay, all right, well, I'm gonna be up till 4 a.m. fixing these.
I saw a very good tweet go around the start of this week, which was if coffee's not enough to wake you up on Monday morning, try deleting production.
I
Which
actually saw that too, and that was great.
yeah, absolutely. So basically, what you're telling me is Terraform makes it harder to wake myself up on Monday morning.
Yeah, but for a good reason.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome.
And then we have other products too. Like one of our most popular ones is Vault, and Vault
Yeah.
is sort of a software to manage like secrets and access to different pieces of your infrastructure. So you can store all your credentials and things in Vault encrypted, and then you can also like dynamically provision access to various pieces of your infrastructure.
Right.
So Vault can actually dynamically provision like MySQL credentials, like on the
Mhm.
fly, or
Mhm. Mhm.
AWS credentials, or anything like that. Um, and then we have like Console, which does networking, service discovery, and we have Nomad, which is a sort of like application
Right.
scheduler kind of
Cool.
stuff like that. And then a lot of people will know Vagrant, which
Yes. I
is
think
only
Vagrant
open
was the
source.
first thing I
It was,
encountered.
yes.
Yeah.
It was the
Right.
first thing that was ever built. Um,
Nice.
it was built before HashiCorp even existed
Right.
by Mitchell and Armand.
Oh, interesting. Cool.
And so
I
Vagrant
distinctly
stored
remember
basically.
Vagrant as like a pre-Docker way of
Mhm.
doing VMs as well. Obviously, Docker is not VMs, but like the pre-Docker way of doing like consistent development environments. Is that
Exactly.
like
Yep.
cool? Right.
Yeah, so you can basically
Cool.
define like a Vagrant file that has
Yeah.
like how you want this box to be set up, and then
Right.
everyone can just run it and have a box that is exactly the same.
Right.
And then Packer, which is super cool. A lot of people don't know much about Packer, but basically you can use it to build images. So um,
Hmm.
you can basically define like a script and a bunch of stuff to define like, hey, I want to get an AMI, like an AWS
Right.
image created with like all the stuff I need to run my software. Like,
Yeah.
whatever you have. Like, let's say it's like a Rails app, right? So you got to install Ruby, all that kind of stuff. And then Packer will go ahead and build that image for you. And
Yeah.
you can also take it multi-cloud. So you want that image available in AWS and Google Cloud, it can go on both
Right.
those for you in both places.
For vague. Sorry, this is me having the memory of a goldfish with technologies I've used in the past. I have a vague intuition that I have a project built on Packer floating around somewhere that I'm not actually entirely sure is Packer. No, it's good. Yes, I is using Packer. Cool. Okay, yes.
Nice.
The context of which I've encountered Packer was in building images for the DigitalOcean marketplace,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
made it
That's
super
totally.
easy. Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, well, I want my image available on AWS too. Okay,
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
Just add AWS and you're good to go.
Yeah, that was exactly it. It was an open source game server backend that was very popular with DigitalOcean folks. So we made a Packer image for it so we could throw it on the marketplace and make it one click. Yeah, Packer's super neat. That was a really fun experience. Before that, I was doing some infernal Python image automation builder. And then that was because that was what DigitalOcean originally recommended. And then they updated all their instructions to use Packer. And
Hmm.
I rebuilt the build file and it was much easier.
Yeah,
Neat,
totally.
cool. I didn't realize that was a I mean, I just used it because DigitalOcean told me to, so I didn't realize that was a HashiCorp project. That's super cool.
Yeah, and then we
Um,
actually have like two new products coming out. I don't know when the announcements are this week. We have our HashiConf right now going on,
right,
starting
cool.
tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we have two new ones coming out as well. That will be cool. You
Yeah,
should definitely keep an eye out for those.
that's cool. So we've grabbed you possibly the best time for us, but also I imagine what's a very chaotic week for you.
Yes, very busy.
So on the topic of HashiCorp, so this compared to what we've spoken about so far
Hmm.
is a very different, I guess, also company, but also like role, right? So you're
Right.
not doing product management, you are doing services engineering, which is. Do you
Exactly.
want to tell us a little bit about what that role is?
Yeah, so I was doing product program management for the whole, rest of my career, which was, basically owning a product,
Right.
sort of being responsible for its development, making sure we built the right stuff, made sure we
Yeah.
built it on time, all that kind of stuff. But I was like, I tried this out at a bunch of different companies, and I liked it. It was fun. I was decent at it, but I was like, I don't know if I want to do like just straight up software engineering, like just write code like all
Right.
day, every day.
Right.
But I want to do something like closer to that. And so I was trying to figure out what that would be. And so I was kind of like looking around and I came across this role, which was like implementation services. And so basically what I do is we're like almost like a professional services sort of team within HashiCorp.
Hmm.
And so we help, so customers basically will like pay us to help them implement our software.
Right.
Um, and so they're like, hey, I need 2 weeks of help implementing Vault. And that
Right.
could be anything from like, I just bought Vault. We have no clue how to use it. We don't have enough engineers to
Yeah.
do it, or maybe we don't even have any engineers. Like they're all contractors and they're working on
Yeah.
other stuff, whatever it is. So either, we may just deploy Vault for them,
Hmm.
or we'll help them set up like use cases. Like they're like, okay, I want like dynamic MySQL credentials. Like, so, okay, we'll
Right.
help you set that up. Or, all the way up to like sort of, building, so like Vault and Terraform and all these different products, like they're modular. So they have like these plugins and things. So like Terraform, all the providers are a plugin. So, Terraform supports like, I think it's like over 250 different services, like APIs basically.
Hmm.
But if you've got your own or some new service that's not supported, like you can just write a provider for it and use it with Terraform. So we might even do something like that where we're
Yeah.
helping a customer build this sort of custom provider for them. And so like day to day, I'm basically working with customers
Right.
most of the day, um, on whatever use case they need, whether it's like as
Right.
simple as saying, okay, yeah, here's how you install Vault, here's how you deploy it the right way, here's how you set up a cluster, here's how you set up like replication, right, all that kind of stuff, best
Right.
practices, to writing custom code for them that'll help them sort of make Vault or Terraform work within their company.
Right. So you must see like obviously, as you said, like as an alternative to normal software engineering, this is like a career path that puts new problems in front of you every day because you're seeing lots of people's different code bases. To what
Yeah,
extent there's a lot of parallels here with like developer relations roles where like you're constantly
it's very
one of the things with
similar.
yeah. So one
Yeah,
of the
it's very
big things that
similar.
like struck a chord to me is like with developer relations, one of the things that can happen is like it often feels like you're writing the same few like entry level demos or like entry level kind of like examples over and over again. I imagine there is a certain path that you follow for every client, right? Where like they're starting out relatively looks all fairly similar.
Yeah, we have different sort of like, I don't know, like we have like these like different like jumpstart kind of
Right.
packages and things where we're like,
Yeah.
okay, you don't have anything installed, like here's the like sort of solution that will work for you. And our team has kind of built internally for like our team's use different, we call them accelerators. And so
Right.
our team is like, hey, they're like, okay, I need to install Vault or whatever. And so we're like,
Right.
okay, cool. We've got this accelerator that uses like Terraform and Packer and everything to sort of
Dog
build
fooding,
these
of course.
images. Yeah, I guess it's proven now, so it's not
Yeah.
quite dog fooding, but
Right.
um, but basically, and we're like, okay, cool. So we'll get them set up like with this sort of like solution that we've built that
Right.
we can take to multiple customers to make it easier. So we're not like writing this code over and over again, which that would get boring.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Interesting. So I guess what would you being in this role and like having very intentionally chosen this path, like what would you recommend for folks who are kind of interested in trying this path out as well versus like traditional software engineering?
I think it really just depends on what your interests are.
Hmm.
Um, some people are like, I've seen some people be concerned. They're like, oh, if all I do is be a software engineer my whole career, like, is that okay?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's totally fine. Like, if you love writing code, then write code. If
Right.
you don't want to become a manager, don't become a manager. Like, you don't need to do any of these things that you see other people doing. You should
Yeah.
do what you want to do, right? What's right for you. And
Mm.
you can work, you have to find a company that will support you in that.
Right.
Like if you work at Microsoft or Amazon or anywhere, you can get all the way up to the level of basically like a VP but not be
Hmm.
a manager.
Right.
And so there's opportunities available to people whether they want to become managers or not,
Yeah.
to sort of progress in their career and not get stuck. Now to get to that level, you have to be really smart. Like the people at Microsoft who did that, they made C# and
Right.
TypeScript and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Like what was it? Is Guido van Rossum still like the highest level I see at Dropbox or whatever or something like that? I think he might
I
have
don't know if
left
he's still at
Dropbox. Yeah.
Dropbox or
Yeah.
not, but
Yeah, he's a good example. So those who don't know, he's the guy who invented Python, and at some point, Dropbox hired him because they were using Python a lot, just to be a high level IC who was like their on hand Python reference. But yeah, I know. Yeah, so like we see this. I guess like this is super valuable. It's not valuable. Sorry, super visible on Twitter at the moment of all things. Like I feel like in the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of people talking about lengthening the like individual contributor track, and you see like a lot more people going into principal and staff roles now rather than like
yeah,
manager of developers and that kind of thing. Because it's
I
also
think that's
great
really
for several
important.
reasons. Yeah, because like the skills that make a good software engineer do not necessarily make a good
Right,
people
exactly.
manager, right?
And some people, yeah, exactly. And some people get like forced into being a manager because
Right,
they are basically at the end of their career if they don't,
right, right,
right? Like you
right.
can't get promoted, you can't make any more money. You're just sort of there. And so they're
Yeah,
like, okay, well, I don't want to do this, but like, what other choice do I have? And
yeah,
so I think it's important to have that track so that, you know, you don't want to have a team with a manager who doesn't want to be the manager, right? Like that's
for
not
sure.
not
Yeah,
going to be good for anyone.
yeah. I saw a like internal progression chart at a company I was working with once um, that described it really nicely. Where like it had like entry level engineer was like is familiar with the concept of rope. Mid level engineer was like knows how to tie knots with rope. Senior engineer was like can make rope, and then like the prince going on to principal onward was like invented nylon and that kind of stuff. And it's like a really great kind of like conceptualization of what these roles mean and
Yeah.
how they relate to developer skills.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's a interesting analogy. I think
yeah,
it's decent. Yeah.
I can't remember where that came from now. I mean, if I probably could remember, I probably shouldn't say the name of where that came from. But yeah, cool. So that was, I guess so kind of leaping off from there. You're working at a company where all of their products are open source. I know you dabble in some open source yourself, and we have a show next week. And Anand's coming back to us.
Yes.
Is it Tuesday?
Monday?
It's one of the days. Hang on. Monday. You're back for
Yes.
us on Monday, showing off one of those
Hmm.
projects. So we're not going to jump the gun, but I do want to talk about like your open source kind of alongside this. So like
Yeah.
have you whilst doing all these different roles did you like were you interested in open source and contributing to open source, or is this something that you become more exposed to as you've now kind of worked at a company that's doing more open source?
Yeah, I think earlier in my career, I think
Yeah,
I was scared to do open
interesting.
source
Okay.
because I was afraid that someone would like I'd make this repo public and like people
Right,
would look at it and be like, "Oh my God, look at this garbage code this guy wrote. Like he's so bad
right,
at what he does." Or, make this open source project and just have everyone just be like, "Oh my God, this is so bad. Like
right.
why did you even open source this?" Right? Like I was scared of these
Yeah,
things and it was because I think I didn't really understand like that it didn't matter.
right,
Um,
right.
right. And so it's just like as I sort of progressed, I was like, you know what? I don't care. Like people can say what they want. I'm gonna put this out there. If it's shitty, it's shitty, right? Like whatever. Like and if it's awesome, then people will like it. If it's bad, like hey, help me fix it, right? Like there's
Right.
a lot of ways that you can turn it into a constructive thing. And so as I sort of progressed and I was just like, okay, you know what? Let's open source stuff. Like let's work on projects. Um, Sadly, I didn't have as much time as I wanted to
Yeah,
do a lot of that. Um, but I think a lot of the hesitation comes from being scared like that, and I think we can
right.
talk about it more in the next one. But
Sure.
I mean, some of that stuff does happen, and I think that you just have to know how to deal with it,
Right.
um, and how to sort of not be defeated or feel bad about
Yeah,
other people. I mean, if you've put your effort into this and you've made it public, uh, you know, there's some people who are gonna trash you for it, but I mean, they're not doing any work, right? They're just sitting
right.
there clicking some links on GitHub and saying that your code's bad. Like that's not really fair, and that you shouldn't
Yeah,
take it, you know,
for
to
sure.
mean anything other than this guy. Maybe this guy's, maybe they're jealous they didn't write it. There's a lot of
Right,
other
right, right.
reasons that
Yeah,
people lash out like that.
yeah, for sure. And I think like the people who one of the valuable things about participating in open source, I think, is that like you get the opportunity to put that code out there and actually get some kind of like actionable feedback on it that will help you grow as a developer. There's definitely like actually even this isn't really open source, it's kind of a fraud example, but I feel like I've learned more about good coding practice doing these streams and talking through stuff with people and watching people talk through things they would do differently than I have like in all the projects where I've been like scared to put code out there, which I spoke in an earlier live stream about how I personally am terrified of pair programming because I get enormous performance anxiety. And like a big part of it is like, oh, I'm going to write some awful code in front of someone who like I respect writing code, which like is also probably why like there's definitely projects that I've gone to contribute to where I've gone like, oh no, someone I really respect is on this project and I'm not going to go do that now. And I actually spoke to someone last week who has what they call a burner account, like an alternate GitHub account that they do their open source contributions from because they don't want them associated with their name, which is so sad. And like,
that's sad, but I mean,
yeah.
if that's what you need to feel comfortable, you know, that's okay.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
At least you're able to contribute and do what you want, and if you want to be anonymous, like I think that's fine. As you know, at least you can still contribute. But I would encourage everyone to not be ashamed of what they write and sort of own it. And if it's bad, it's bad, right? Like you'll get better. But if you're still not comfortable, I mean, that's totally valid way to do it.
And when you write that code in a couple of years, you can come on the show and show us the old code, and we'll talk about what you know now and how you can improve it. Which feels like a wonderful transition into talk about some of your old code.
Oh no.
So I believe you bought a Laravel app with us. So I guess hang on, just to briefly explain what we do here. So this is a thing we've done a couple of times on the show. We've done it with some C, we've done it with some Ruby. Chris Hunt, who was hanging around in the chat earlier, did it with some Ruby with us on Friday. Basically, kind of in this spirit of like looking back at how we've grown as engineers and as developers, we encourage guests to bring some old code with them, and then we look at it together, and they tell us what the code does, why they build it, where they build it from, and talk about a little bit about how things have changed and what they do differently today. So, what have you bought for us today, Anand? Is it okay for me to add that screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. That's a little. So, Anand has the most incredible screen share setup I've ever seen. So, if this is a little bit small, let us know and we'll do our best. But it is in itself a hack worthy of talking about.
Okay. So, I do all my coding on my Mac. I have an iMac, you know, MacBook and whatever.
Yeah.
But usually if I'm like playing video games or whatever, I'll be on my PC. Right. And so I've got my camera hooked up to my PC, my headset. Those just all kind of work better on a PC. And I've got like the NVIDIA sort of like noise cancellation stuff and the video blurring and all that, which you can't do on Mac.
Right.
So right now, like I'm looking at my Mac, but my headset, my camera are connected to my PC. And so then, you know, I was trying to figure out like how do I share my screen since it's not the same computer. And on the side, like sometimes I'll like share my screen on Discord with my friends, or if I'm like coding on the open source project in the Discord, and the screen sharing on Mac with Discord is just really bad. Like it freezes, and like I'll be talking to my friend about something and he'll be like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you don't see this right here? And he's like, no, you're like on this other file. And I'm like, that was a minute ago. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I do now is I open a Zoom meeting and I share my screen in the Zoom meeting and I full screen it on my other computer and I share that monitor.
It's beautiful. It's like chef's kiss level of like video tomfoolery.
See it probably hover over here. Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know if it shows up or not. Yeah, it does. Okay.
Yeah, you got the Zoom thing at the top. Beautiful. As someone who is running a dual machine setup, almost exactly in the same circumstances, like Windows and Mac, to make the stream work, I deeply appreciate it. Cool. So onto the app. So this is a Laravel voting app. We can see that much. Yes. Cool.
And more so coming soon, and so that's it.
Nice. So what is Laravel, I guess, to start with?
Sure. So Laravel is a framework, a web framework for PHP.
Mm-hmm.
And it's honestly like my favorite framework by far. Like I've worked with, you know, Rails, which is pretty cool. I've worked with like Django. I've worked, you know, with most like popular web frameworks, and I've always just really liked Laravel. Mm-hmm. It is heavily based on Rails, so that's mm-hmm. where like a lot of that comes from. Right. But it's a PHP framework, and I've just always liked PHP. People love to trash it, but I mean,
People
for
love to
most of
trash
those
every
reasons,
yeah. Some people
exactly.
love to
Like
trash every program language. We're not about the program language tribalism here, folks. It's all good.
most of those reasons are not valid, and
Yeah,
for every reason that you can say something bad about one language, like you've got
right.
other reasons for another language, right? So like
Yeah,
the people who list out this huge list of bad stuff about a programming language, that's just
yeah,
them like cherry picking it, but you
right.
can come up with the same list for any language. Like
Yeah, for
I don't know
sure.
if you've seen like the WAT video for JavaScript, which is
I
just
love that video. Now I need to go find it for chat. That is my
yeah,
favorite.
right.
That the thing I like to think of the WAP video. So for those who haven't seen it, I'm about to post it in chat. But basically, it's by Gary Bernhardt, who is a wonderful developer, but also just like software satirist. I guess he's like website where he has a paid subscription for software training videos. Is called Destroy All Software, that shows you the energy which he brings. So this talk, oh hi Kenny, thanks for joining. This talk is called WAT, where he just shows like a bunch of broken stuff in JavaScript and Ruby. But yeah, I like to. This video is like, this isn't criticism of programming or programming languages, it's performance art, and that is like the only level of acceptable soft like programming language criticism that I would take. It's now in the chat for those who want to see that.
But I think that's a hilarious video, but in
Yeah,
a funny way, it kind of outlines some of the weird things that JavaScript
right,
does, right?
right,
And
right,
in a similar way, you've got weird things PHP does, you've got weird things Python does, right? And sort of
right,
becoming a master of that language is knowing those weird things and working with it, like working around
right.
them. Um, and so yeah, I'm a fan of PHP. I like it. You know,
Cool. Yeah,
I mean, there's uses for it, right?
right.
So if you're building like a website, some kind of web application, like it's great. If you want to
Yeah,
build a desktop app and you're trying to use PHP, like that's not the right solution to
right.
your problem. You should use
Yeah,
something else. But
yeah,
in the sort of context of web applications, things like that, like it's a
yeah,
great language with the sort of, you know, request response model where,
yeah,
you know, you don't have to worry about garbage collection or anything like that. Like
yeah.
it's actually really great.
Right. One of my still favorite things about PHP, which like I guess is really not a valid reason to like PHP in 2020, but it's one I always recommend, is like every terrible shared hosting provider in the world, like the host gators, like the people you can throw them $5 a month and you get like some minimal slice of a Linux VM and you have a cPanel set up. Every
Mm-hmm.
one of those is like ready to go with PHP, and that's the only like thing you can run on it yourself, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
like whatever
Totally.
they've got set up in their cPanel. So like for like your mother's uncle who wants a website for their car garage, it's still like the easiest thing to send them to. It still works so well for that reason. Um, so one of the things you said a minute ago was that you like Laravel as a framework because it draws a lot of
Mm-hmm.
inspiration from Rails. For folks who are like less
Right.
familiar with the magic that Rails like does, like what does that mean for a web framework? Like what is it that what kind of features like is it doing, or I guess
Yeah,
lending
so
from
I mean,
Rails?
you know, it's like, what does this framework provide to you?
Yeah,
And so like Rails and Laravel, you know, are MVC frameworks, which is kind
right.
of the model view controller sort of
Mhm.
model. So you've got your models, you've got your views, you've got your controllers. Probably don't need to go too much into
Yeah, we
that,
did.
but
We went into MVC quite a lot last Friday's show with Chris and John. So you can find that on our Twitch channel if you need a refresher on that. Sorry, go ahead.
perfect. Um, and so basically, you know, the frameworks will provide like things to you, right? So like in every language, you need to like figure out how to like listen for requests, like whether in PHP that's usually done through like some kind of other web server, but then you need to like parse that request, right? Like what path are they using? Like what data are they sending you? Like kind of how do you figure all of that out? And so usually you end
Right.
up like writing all of this sort of like code just like over and over again to handle that. Which a framework helps you sort of kind of abstracts that from you and lets you just
Yeah.
focus on your actual code, like your application logic, and not like all this weird like essentially like plumbing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and then it provides other things, usually like, for example, help with databases. So whether it has like an ORM, which will help you sort of like map things in your database to your
Right.
classes and models, or you
Right.
know, database migration framework, so you can actually like keep your database in a consistent state when you update it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to like view rendering, so like how do you render like HTML to the user
Yeah.
with like templating and stuff like that. Um, I said those, and like session management,
Sure.
caching. Those are probably like very basic features of a framework.
Yeah.
And Laravel provides like all of that and a lot of other really cool stuff too. So
Neat.
like one of the coolest features of Laravel, in my opinion, is the queue system that Laravel has. So Laravel has like a fully sort of featured queue system where you can actually create, these basically like jobs, and you can
Huh.
push them to the queue, and then you can have those executed like in the background. So, for example, like a lot of applications, when you sign up,
Yeah.
after you hit sign up, like you'll notice the page takes longer to load than like a lot of the other pages. That's
Right.
because they're actually sending you the email when you sign up, right? So
Right. Right. Right.
when you hit sign up, that email, like to verify your email address, is actually they're calling the sort of mail server that they're using. They're sending the email, waiting for it to like get the okay, cool, like we got your email kind of thing, and then that's when you get your response back
Hmm.
in languages that aren't asynchronous, like PHP, for example. Um, and so with like queuing, what you can do is you can say, okay, I want to send this user an email, but like I don't need to send them the email to be able to show them the next page.
Yeah.
So let's just throw this email in the queue. I'll let the queue workers like handle it whenever they want to, and we'll tell the user, thanks for signing up, like check your email.
Hmm.
Um, that's like the most basic example, right? But you can do like if you want to pull statistics from your database and update that somewhere, or like keep a cache hydrated, or like there's tons of different use cases where you can sort of queue these things and do them in the
Yeah.
background and not worry about sort of having them like blocking the user
Yeah.
from continuing on with what they want to do.
That's super cool. I didn't realize that
And
was
Laravel has like a
inbuilt.
super cool like queue system that a lot of
Yeah.
frameworks like have nothing like, where you have to pull in some
Right.
other package. But
Yeah.
the Laravel queue system is super cool because it's got like support for a bunch of different drivers. So
Hmm.
you can run it on like a Redis instance. So if you have Redis, you can just like use Redis for your queuing.
Yeah.
If you don't have anything, you can just use your database. You can use like SQS on AWS. You can use, all these different sort of options to wherever you deploy your app. Basically,
Hmm.
you can use wherever that native queue functionality is.
Nice. Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Very neat. Thank you for walking us through why you like Laravel. Should we dive into this particular Laravel code? So when was
No.
this written?
Let's take a look. I don't.
Sure.
I think I actually do want to say when it was written because maybe it'll save me. Uh,
It's all in the spirit of good fun.
okay, 7 years ago.
Nice, cool. That's not the oldest code
Seven.
we've had, but it's
Okay.
definitely up there. It's the oldest code that's still an existing frame. Well, no. So we had a 10-year-old Ruby on Rails app and an 8-year-old Firefox OS app, and that one doesn't count really because Firefox OS no longer exists. This is the
Yeah.
second oldest, like still runnable code that we have.
Almost runnable. It took me.
Almost runnable.
I kind of got it running, but it took a little bit of time
Yeah.
because it relied on some like PHP extensions that Laravel used that like basically don't get shipped with PHP anymore because you don't need them. And
Right.
it was interesting because this was probably on like PHP 5.2 or 3 maybe.
Okay.
And now we're on 7.4, I believe. 8's coming out soon.
Uh huh.
It's pretty old. Um, but yes, I kind of remember what this was for.
Cool.
So I was in a club in college, and we had like it was like a web development club, and we had
Right.
like different things that like we would vote on, like from like the most basic stuff, like what
Yeah.
kind of pizza should we get for our meeting, to like
Right.
who should be elected to the board and
Right.
stuff like that.
Club chair or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I made this like app in Laravel to like let everyone like log in and vote and kind of like keep track of all the votes and all that stuff. Um,
Cool.
so yeah, let's look at it.
So in its lifetime, so it says more info hit coming soon. Like in its lifetime, did it run and like work for that club?
Yeah, it worked. It was interesting. So like there is some kind of like interface obviously where you can like
Yeah.
see what you can vote on and vote,
Right.
but I definitely remember not building any sort of way to like look at the results. So
That's amazing.
um so I distinctly remember
Yeah.
every time we were done voting,
You'd have
I
to
would
crack open the
log
DB.
in.
Yeah.
I'd like log into the server, like SSH into the server,
Yeah.
and Laravel has this thing called like Tinker, so you can basically like
Right.
it's kind of like a REPL, but like inside the framework, so you can like use all of the like framework commands and
Yeah.
models and sort of all the magic of the framework. It's
Right.
the same as like the Rails console or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember having to. I didn't even have a way to like oh, for this poll, like what are all the like votes? Like so I was
Right.
like, okay, like I think I like was writing like this weird like so eloquent is the ORM in Laravel, and I was like writing this
Yeah.
weird query like every time like okay, like find all the votes for this poll, like okay, this choice, like how many did they get, and I'd like write it down. I'd be like, okay, all right, the other choice, how many they get, I'd like write it down. It's like totally like I could have just like
Yeah.
fudged anything I wanted to
Thrown
be.
up a really terrible UI and be done with it. Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
nice. That's great.
And so
Cool.
so yeah, that's what this is basically. I have to figure out like where everything is because this is Laravel 4, and so
Right.
Laravel 4 was, I would say, like the one of the biggest rewrites of Laravel, mainly because in some of the other versions of Laravel, like before it, it didn't use Composer, which is the package manager for PHP, and I think part of that is because Composer wasn't really a thing back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
Um, and so like this was the first version of Laravel that like used Composer, and it
Interesting.
actually like so like it sort of split the way Laravel works into two different pieces. So in like 1, 2, and 3, when you downloaded it, you'd have like this folder called like Laravel or something, and that was the
Hmm.
whole framework. And then you'd have these other folders where you like called app and stuff where you'd like put your app.
Hmm.
Um, but with starting with like 4, what they did was the whole framework is actually in its own package in Composer. So like all the files in here are like files I need for my app specifically or things I can
Right.
customize. And then the rest of the framework is in here. It's like the
It's in
same
same
as like
package, right?
Rails being in like a gem, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so that was like a huge change. So this was
Mhm.
at least on Laravel 4. But it's still very different from what like a Laravel app looks like today. So
Right.
like I don't even know where, let's see, like now there's like a routes folder, but I guess here we just have a routes file.
Right.
So let's take a look. Oh, good. I've got like half controllers, half like code in line and like closures. This is wonderful.
This is the I haven't looked at PHP for so long.
Oh
Okay,
man, it's
my eye
triple
needs to.
nested.
Yeah.
You don't, your eyes are gonna hurt no matter what. This is like back when I didn't know how to make code look nice at all. Apparently I was like super into like not using curly braces if I didn't have to. So like this
I mean, that's a
is
respectable choice.
this is valid in PHP even though it's really confusing.
Hmm. So that's because it's indented. That
Oh,
throw
yeah,
new
doesn't
is
have to be
scopes up.
indented, I
Okay.
don't think. It
Right.
just like knows the next line is part of the if statement, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Um, super bad, don't do it.
Right.
But when I was in college, I thought that was super cool because I didn't like curly braces for
Less
some reason.
syntax. Yeah, for sure.
Um, Now
So
there's
you
way cooler ways you can do stuff like this.
right.
For example, now in Laravel, probably like at least 5, maybe 6. Instead, like if I wanted to like throw like a four, this is essentially it throws a 404, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so basically now if you wanted to do something like this, you could just do like, well, actually in Laravel, you could just do abort, uh,
Hmm.
abort, and you can do it either way. You can do if or unless, but we can say like
Right.
abort if, the poll or whatever, when, and then you just gotta do like that basically. And then
Oh,
that's
nice.
it.
Yeah.
Like you don't need any
Wow.
of this now. Like that
Huh.
will just throw a 404 if this evaluates to true.
Right.
Or actually, I gotta throw a 404 in here. But yeah, um, so that's like you could make it like super clean like that,
Yeah.
and not even have an if statement, um,
Huh.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know,
S-
don't mix these like any like in a Laravel app these days, like you shouldn't
right.
be using like closures in your route file anymore
Okay.
for the most part.
Hmm.
If you're testing stuff, it's cool, but otherwise, like stick it in a controller or something. Like otherwise, you end up with
Right.
this like mile long routes file that's like literally your
Right.
entire like app's code.
I see. Okay. So routes in Laravel look very familiar to, I mean, routes in every framework, but particularly to me to
Mm,
like Express. So you've just got route and then the get method, and
right, the
then
verb here, your
cool.
path, and
Okay.
then this is the the closure for the function. But you can
Got you.
pass like, well, it's different. This is like old school Laravel, so you had to pass this array. Actually, like even this array, like you don't need to do this anymore, and
Right.
you can just do that like and wrap it in square brackets, and that's like way
Nice.
easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just basically, it's actually kind of interesting. Like with this, the syntax has really not changed much.
Right.
Um, Now you don't need to like pass this array if you're just using like if you just want to pass this controller, you can.
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe I even did this wrong. Maybe I didn't even need to put the uses here. Who knows? Um, but it's kind of cool how some pieces of it have changed a lot, but some
Right.
pieces are still just like the same, right? And so you see
Yeah.
this and you're like, oh, I know this. Like, okay, cool. Um,
What is
some of
carbon?
the
Oh, sorry.
Carbon
Go
is
ahead.
the
Yeah.
oh no, go for it. Yeah, Carbon is the date library that
Okay.
is probably most used in PHP. So like,
Right.
what is it in Java? Like Moment, I think.
Not
Uh,
anymore. They hung up.
oh
They.
yeah, that's true. I just
Yeah.
read that
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
couple weeks ago, I think. Like a
Yeah.
week or two, I
Yeah.
saw that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so like it's like Moment or
Right.
whatever the new one is now. So you
Yeah.
can use Carbon to do dates basically.
Cool.
Um, but it's interesting. I didn't realize like some of the stuff here in Laravel, like all the way back to like Laravel 4, some of the really
Hmm.
cool features are actually like still here.
Hmm.
So for example, this poll right here. So
Right.
this is like going to be the ID of the poll
Sure.
right here. So you're going to like go to like poll/1 or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and what's really cool about this is, sorry, that's my dog. Is what Laravel will do is, so this is what Laravel calls like route model binding.
Right.
And so it will actually infer based on like your type hint here, which is like the model that you want,
Hmm.
and like what you put in this like curly braces for your
Hmm.
URL. And it'll be like, okay, so you're telling me that I want a poll with the ID 1. And
Hmm.
so what Laravel will do is it'll like look for that in your database, and if it finds it, it'll just like pass this into your function, like it'll just inject it
Oh
in.
wow.
And
Okay.
see how I'm not retrieving the poll at all here?
Yeah.
That's because Laravel has just basically been like, okay, I know exactly what you want. Here you go. And if it can't
Right.
find it, then it'll just do a 404 for you. Um,
Fascinating.
and
Okay.
so I didn't actually realize that this was in Laravel 4. I totally
Yeah.
forgot. And it works nested too, so you can like do it nested like this here, where you've got two
Hmm.
different
You've got
ones,
multiple ones. Right.
and you can pass them both in. Now in like
Right.
newer versions of Laravel, this is by ID, but if you wanted to
Hmm.
do like by like some other field, like let's say you had a slug, you can just do this, and then it'll look it up by slug instead of the ID. Um,
Very cool.
so you've got like super cool ways to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's like, I guess this is where it gets kind of into the category of like things magically happening that uh make me nervous in terms of like not understanding what's going on. But so I guess that's powered by the ORM's understanding of your models, right?
yeah, basically. I mean, there's tons of ways to customize it as well.
Right.
So like if you don't want to have it like resolve your models like the way that it wants to, you can easily like define that and say, okay, no, I want to
Sure.
resolve my models this way.
Got you.
So there is like that magic that happens, but in a lot of cases you can customize or change the
Got
logic.
you. Cool.
So it's like magic, but you're not stuck with it if you don't like it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. So this
Yeah.
first file, your main beef for this file is that you're doing a lot of things in the roots. You're doing these closures in the roots that you wouldn't do them
Yeah, and
now.
I have
Doing them
controllers
nowadays.
too. So like
Okay,
I don't
great.
know why there's no like poll control right here. Um yeah, I don't know why like this is wrapped in parentheses for no reason. Um,
I like your ligatures for your arrows.
oh, thank you.
This is completely irrelevant to the, to the
Yeah,
thing.
this is the Mona Lisa font.
Oh, cool. Was that
I don't know.
Microsoft?
I think I paid like $80 for it or
Oh,
something.
cool.
I don't know
Nice.
why, but I did. It's cool, I guess.
That's nice.
I even like this. I don't know why I have capital R's and lowercase r's. Like I just didn't care, I guess, about code style at
Right.
all back then.
Yeah.
I was
It
just
does
like,
look like, because like the difference is when you get to poll. So it looks like something changed when you started rolling this like writing this poll method in particular. Like there was some, I don't know, maybe last minute hackery going on here, and so it didn't
I
get the
think that
same
was
due
exactly what
diligence.
happened was
Yeah.
like, oh, we have a meeting in an hour and I want to make this work. And I think
Right.
that's where this came from.
Yeah. So what did like
And,
where you've got these like oh sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, and like I think I also just wasn't as familiar with Laravel, right? Like it was probably
Right.
new to me back then. Not
Yeah.
new. Like Laravel Fair would before would have been like new to me back then.
Right.
Because it had completely changed like the way it did things compared to like 1, 2, and 3. So I was
Mm-hmm.
probably just like trying to figure out like what I was doing too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So with the other routes that have controllers, like what are those?
Mhm.
What is so does it look similar inside those controllers to what we're seeing inside the poll route here? It's just that it's broken out into a different file, or is there something else going on inside those?
I'd like to say the code in there will be much nicer, but I don't think
We
that's
can
gonna
always
happen.
hope.
Um, yeah, so you've got basically the same thing, right? Like, so
Mhm.
instead of just like using this closure to like
Yeah.
write your code, you know, it's a function in your controller.
Right.
They
Right.
work the exact same
Cool.
otherwise. Um, so here is like the login. So this is actually used OAuth with GitHub.
Yeah, I saw you had a GitHub .php file somewhere. I can't remember where it was.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
config file in here.
cool.
Yeah, and
Was there
so
a at this point was there a GitHub PHP wrapper, or were you just doing raw? Oh, I can see you were just doing. Yeah, you're just
so
doing
this
raw.
is a
Okay.
redirect. We'll see if there's
Yeah.
anything else I used or not. Looks like that's a no. Yeah, I
Cool.
was literally just doing it like straight up myself. Um, Nowadays, if you want to do this in Laravel, you'd use something called like Socialite,
Right.
which is a like first party Laravel
Yeah.
package that just
Cool.
handles most of this for you.
I do have to
Um,
say I like your hard coded check if admin there based on it's checking a particular GitHub team.
oh yeah, so that's a fun one. So I don't know
Yeah.
why I did this, but I've got like that like GitHub, like some of the different things like this configuration here for like the
Right.
client ID client secret. But then like the org name
Yeah.
and the team ID, I just like straight hard coded that.
Right.
Like
Well, I guess it's never gonna. It's this is built for your club. It's never gonna change. I guess that makes sense.
that's must be what I thought.
Yeah.
Um, and so, you know, that's probably I would have made those variables too. I mean, it would have taken me
Mhm.
like an extra 3 seconds to do it, right? Because it would
Right.
be the same as this.
Right.
Just to make it like, I mean, you know, stuff happens. Like, what if we renamed the org, right? It's still for
Mhm.
our club, but like we renamed the org because the club got a new name, or
Yeah.
someone deleted this team by accident, and so we had to
Yeah.
make a new
Yeah.
one.
Actually,
Things like
that's
that,
also a
right?
good point. That like the GitHub org doesn't even go by the org's GitHub ID. It goes by the name, and like that
Exactly.
name can always be changed. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like even if you're thinking about it from the mindset of like I'm building this for this thing and like it's never going to be used for anything else. Like
Right.
there's still scenarios where you may need to be able to like change things. Like,
Yeah.
you know, this was Laravel 4 and like who knows how I deployed this. But like in other scenarios, it might be harder to like make this code change and get it deployed quickly if something breaks.
Yeah.
But if you got it in a configuration, that might be easier to change and deploy.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess there's no clue in this fight in the directory structure about how you deployed it. I'm not seeing any. Well, I don't know if Docker files were. Oh wait, 7 years ago. I can't remember.
No,
Yeah, I'm
no,
not.
we wouldn't.
Yeah.
No, not many people deploy PHP and Docker actually. It's
Oh,
not
interesting.
as common.
Mm.
Um, I bet you this was just running on some server with like
Right.
Nginx and PHP, and I bet you
Yeah.
to deploy it, I just went on the server and did a git pull and hoped everything
I mean
worked
that
fine.
would be sophisticated. I think my when I was last doing PHP, it was definitely still FTPing stuff around.
Yeah, that was the old way I did it too. So it looks like I'm like grabbing a user here, like
Hmm.
storing the user, and then these all these session flashes and redirects.
What is a session flash? Oh, I
So
see. It's
this
just
basically
okay.
persists something to the session for only
Right.
the next request. So you can pull it out on the next request, but then it's gone. So for
Oh,
like alerts and stuff, you can use that for so that
interesting.
you don't actually have to clear it yourself. When you retrieve it, it's automatically gone.
Yeah.
But like this just doesn't look nice.
It's very many lines of indentation. It reminds me a little bit of Node.js.
hmm And so like there's a lot of these like things where like yeah, like this is I probably would have done this like 100% different now.
Hmm.
Um,
What would you have done differently? Well, I guess what's happening here that you don't like was is probably the better place to start.
Almost all of it. No,
Okay.
kidding. So basically, I would definitely want to like abstract some of this like
Hmm.
GitHub sort of functionality to like get the like token from the users like sort of like callback and like
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff. I would want to pull that out into its own class
Hmm.
and not do it like in my controller
Right.
because I'm kind of mixing up like two different things. One is like what my app wants to do, like with the user and like how it's going to get stored and all that stuff. And then also like all of the logic to just like talk to GitHub and like find out who that person
Mhm.
is. And so it's really hard to figure out like what this function is doing because it's doing both talking to GitHub and also like creating my users and storing them and stuff.
Mhm.
And so if I were to like have abstracted out some of the GitHub stuff, so it's like, you know, all of this stuff, right? Like you could basically like take that, and make that like a
Yeah.
function call.
Mhm.
And then, actually like all this, right? Where the GitHub like 204 success and
Right.
all that kind of stuff, like we can pull all this out and then just only have the logic for like once we have the GitHub user, like what do we do with it?
Right. Yeah, I guess that's Chris and John spent a lot of time on Friday talking about um, abstractions and where to take things out and where to leave them in. Particularly again, like with Rails being another MVC framework.
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of like crazy unnecessary abstraction. Like
Mhm.
some people like to make interfaces for like every single thing and like abstract like everything to like the nth degree. And
Right.
you know, you have to like sort of, I would say like in this case, like it's not really abstraction. It would just be like separation, right? Like I'm just
Right.
pulling this code out into a different
Yeah.
place so I can see like all my GitHub service code and like all of my login code, right?
Mhm.
Separately. But with abstraction, like a lot of people love to like abstract everything at the beginning.
Right.
And I'm in general fairly against that because you're basically adding like this layer of indirection to your code that's going to confuse people working on it
Yeah.
for the like on the off chance that you maybe need to like swap this out later,
Mhm.
right? And so like all that effort you're putting in to like adding this abstraction and then all the effort people are putting in to like figure out how it works is
Right.
probably less, it's probably more effort than it would take to just refactor that when you actually need to do it, right?
Right.
So your
Yeah. Makes
productivity
sense.
almost goes down when you have all these crazy abstractions for essentially no reason other than what if the future happens.
Yeah.
And it's good to think about like where your app should be going and where it's
Right.
going to be in a little bit, but you should also take the time to focus on like where it's at now, right?
Right.
Like
And
if
get
we're
it
writing
across the
code
line
that's
to
all,
usable.
yeah, exactly. Like if we're writing code that's all for what happens in 2 years, like how's it
Right.
going to work now? Like what about
Yeah.
today?
Hi, Skywolf. Welcome back to the stream. Sorry. Uh, cool. So, is there anything else you'd like to show us on this particular app? So that was the controllers that we jumped in here because of the roots, and you
I
saying
have
that
no
you would have
clue,
broken the
yeah, what
roots.
this
Yeah.
is. So I think this is just like Laravel stuff here. We can take a look at the database migrations.
So
Okay.
actually, would you like to tell us like what migrations are? So I
Yeah.
this is probably also a bit embarrassing. I feel like I was in the tech world for a long time, doing kind of dev adjacent roles, but I myself had never worked in any kind of like big Railsy framework. And it wasn't until maybe my second year in GitHub that I finally like looked at someone and was like, what is a migration? I like actually learned like what it was and how it works. So yeah, what is, I guess they work the same here as they do in other frameworks, but like what is a migration and where are they useful?
Yeah, like an easy way to describe it would be basically like version control for your
Right.
database,
Right.
for your database schema, that is. And so, you've got your database, you have to create tables in it, you have to create columns for where
Mm-hmm.
what you want to store your data. Like you have to define those columns as like strings or date times or, ints or whatever you want to do.
Right.
And you add more, you remove stuff, you change stuff over time. So the problem is like when you're developing locally and you're making these changes to your database, you're just like you pull up like some kind of like SQL client like Table Plus or something, and you're like you can
Right.
just go in and you can be like, um, there's no tables here, so you can't see anything. But like if you can pull up your table and be like, okay, cool, I want to make this like an int or I want to add a new column or whatever, right?
Right.
And then when you go to deploy this on your server, you either forget that you did that and your app's broken, and then you're like, oh no, okay, hang on, I made this an int, okay, I added this
Yeah.
column, I removed this column. And if if your local database and your production database aren't the same schema,
Right.
then you're going to run into issues somewhere, right?
Okay.
And so with migrations, that helps you sort of organize your database like changes. So
Mm-hmm.
what will happen is like Laravel will run these migrations in order. So they're kind of ordered by date with like a
Mm-hmm.
timestamp. of basically when you created them. And so like what it's going to do is it's going to go when I run the migrate command, it's going to say, okay, I'm
Right.
going to run this migration, run the next one, and then run the fourth one. And it's going to store that, okay, I ran these four.
Mm-hmm.
Then if I say, okay, cool, I need a new table, or let's say here on this votes table, like I need to add a new column, I'll make a new migration that will say, hey, add this new column to the votes table.
Right.
And then when I go to deploy it, I can run my migrations and it'll say, okay, I already ran the first four, so don't have to worry about those, but there's this new fifth one, let me run it. And then
Mm-hmm.
it'll run the SQL that it needs to then keep my database in that same consistent state as when I was developing it.
Cool.
And you
Okay.
also have ways to roll back migrations, which
Right.
that gets really tricky. Like, you know, if you're, say you add a column and you want to
Mm-hmm.
roll back, like you're going to lose all that data, right?
Right.
But there, it's a feature that like should rarely be used, but it's
Yeah.
there in case you like really need it.
I guess like, what are the situations where you'd want to roll back a migration but care about
Let's say
the
you deploy.
data?
Well, what about the opposite scenario where you have a
Right.
migration that's deleted columns
Right.
and you want to roll it back? Like, how do you do that,
Oh,
right?
I see. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
can't. I mean, you can add the column back, but there's gonna be no data.
Right.
Um, but like the scenario where you might need to do a rollback is like if you deploy code that relies like that changes your schema and you realize that code's broken and you need to like roll back the old version, you may need
Yeah.
to also roll back your database, otherwise that old version won't work anymore too.
Right. 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 Cool. So are these migrations are mostly things that are like auto-generated by the framework, right? So you'd very rarely be coming into here and messing with things yourself.
You would in Laravel you write all the migrations yourself.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
The framework can't know what columns you want, right? Like it
Right.
doesn't know that my user needs a name, email, password, and like GitHub
Right. Right.
credentials,
Right.
right? So you'll create like a model in Laravel or something, and you can create a migration with it, and that'll just be an empty migration. So when you create a model in Laravel with a migration, you'll literally get this, I believe. So it's like, okay, here's your empty migration.
Yeah.
We know you probably want an ID, and we know you probably want timestamps, but everything else you have to define yourself.
Interesting. Okay. So you can't just like infer that from like your schema.
Well, this is the schema, right? So there's nowhere to infer it from.
I see. Okay. Where have I seen? I'm trying to think why I think it regenerated. Okay, cool.
And there are some frameworks where you instead of doing it in the database, so Laravel is like
Right.
it'll infer it from your database, but there's some ORMs that do it the other way around. So you'll
Mhm.
create a model and you'll define like properties on that model. And it works better in like strongly typed languages, like where the types actually mean something.
Right.
And so then you can say, okay, I want a string on this one, I want an int on this one, I want a bool on this one. And then it can auto-generate a schema for you then because you're telling it what the properties are. So it basically
Right. Right.
works
Right.
the opposite way.
Sure. Cool. Okay. Awesome. Rad. Thank you for running us through that. So I guess there's
Yeah,
not a whole lot in here that's controversial.
not too bad. Um, yeah, I don't know how. Oh, I guess it was all here, right? Yeah, it's
Right.
all here, like these views. So then
Mm-hmm.
if we look at like a view, we've got like a poll.blade.
Oh, so I'm guessing Blade is a templating language.
Yeah, Blade is the Laravel like templating engine.
Cool.
And so Blade lets you use like directives like this for each directive,
Mm-hmm.
and you can like loop through things and like output HTML, or you can embed variables in here or things like that. This looks like
Cool.
Bootstrap too, I think. Um, yeah. But basically, yeah, and then Blade lets you do like sort of this whole like templating system. So this
Mm-hmm.
extends like a layout. And
Right.
all this one has is just this content. But then if we
Yeah.
go to the layout, here's like our whole like,
Yeah. Bootstrap.
the bootstrap and then the like nav bar and like all that kind of stuff's up here. We can see if the user's logged in and show them that they're logged in or like all that kind of stuff. And then down here is like where that content will get injected in the app.
Right. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, that looks fairly sensible. We had a funny enough a show early before this where it was the folks from Dev2 and Forum talking mostly about liquid tags,
Oh yeah.
which is another very similar templating engine.
Yeah, there's a lot. I think. I mean, you've got like
Yeah.
handlebars or whatever.
Right.
That's JavaScript stuff, I believe, and
Yeah.
yeah, every language has something similar, probably.
Yeah.
Um,
And they all have their own syntactical madness. But this one looks relatively. I guess this is so inside a directive. So, for example, there you've got like so this if where it's like auth check.
mhm.
So within the directive, you can just like call straight to like normal PHP code.
Yeah, so this is just
Cool.
so the reason for this is mostly because these are actually PHP files, right? And so
Right.
you're just sort of like, and then Blade, the templating engine, is kind of parsing these directives and like probably just replacing these like directives with like actual PHP code.
Right.
And then it's getting like rendered basically.
Interesting. Okay. Cool.
So yeah, you can just straight call like any PHP you want. And I mean, if you really want to go like crazy, like with Blade, you can actually do just at PHP and like put whatever PHP you want in here, and
Yeah.
then use like end PHP, and you can just execute
God,
literally whatever you want, which is
I
like
always
not
think.
good. Like, don't do that, but like you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. I just like completely. I guess forgot like the days where you actually just like did the question mark PHP and just wrote PHP
Yep.
like alongside your rest of your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Yes, I mean, if you're looking at it from that perspective, like
Yeah.
back in the day, like you would do, like if we go back to that other file, like this would just be a PHP file that like you'd literally open like
Right.
in your browser, right? There'd be no router or anything.
Yeah.
And then if you wanted to like output something like this, you would literally do what you said. You'd be like question mark PHP echo like
Yeah.
right like poll or something, and then you'd like close it, or then you'd get into like the PHP like short syntax, I
Right.
think, where like then you
Yeah.
could just do that. And
Yeah.
then I think it got even smaller where if you wanted to echo it, you could do like an equal sign and it would echo it. Um,
The web was so much simpler and so much uglier, but I do kind of miss just like this working. And it
and then now
FTPing it
you've
to
got
my terrible
this.
cPanel host.
Yeah, right. And then not uploading like one file correctly, and then the whole thing's broken, and you're trying to figure
Yeah.
out why. And yeah, those were the days.
I feel like I'm kind of tempted to go deploy a PHP BB forum somewhere. Maybe
PHP
that
BB. Oh man.
yeah. Maybe that would be a fun episode. We just deploy a PHP BB forum and get like Twitch mob programming on a. We just post the FTP details and hope for the best.
That sounds really dangerous, but I
It
like
does
it.
sound terrible.
I know I've seen like all kinds of stuff where like I think it
Yeah.
might even been PHP BB where like PHP lets you do like I think the reason a lot of people don't like it is because you can basically do anything you want no matter how terrible it is.
Right.
So I mean I've seen like I think it's PHP BB or maybe it's like simple machine forums or something where like you can literally like define like an array and you
Right.
can like you can use like I'm pretty sure this worked and it like scares me that it worked. Uh, and then you can do like something like this, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
this is like half pseudocode, half real code. But like and then you can literally do this, which is what scares me. Like that is a thing that you can do.
That just
You can
isn't
define
that
an
isn't that a thing
array.
that people do in JavaScript? Like this is just normal, isn't it?
Yeah, but like in PHP,
Right.
you have like fully real classes and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. So like
There's like better ways of
putting
doing this.
functions into an
Yeah.
array and calling them
Yeah.
out of the array is like
Yeah.
you can do it, but like I can't think of a good scenario where you actually need to do it in
Uh,
PHP.
plugin systems, I guess, is like a way of reasonable.
Kind of, but like with a plugin system, so you can use variables like in your. So if we had like let's say like we accepted some variable and like let's say we
Mm-hmm.
validated it, so it's all good. But like eventually we had like right like plugin, and let's say like it got validated to like cool plugin or whatever.
Right.
Like you can do like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's fine. Like you can literally
Right. I see.
use strings to instantiate classes and functions and stuff.
Interesting.
And so if
Okay.
you're building a plugin system or something like that, makes a lot more sense.
Right. Cool. Awesome. Rad. So we're kind of at time. Anything else you want to talk about on this app, or should we call it a day for this one?
No, I think
Perfect.
that's good.
All right.
Yeah,
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for going on that little coding adventure with us. And as we said, we will be
definitely.
back with pterodactyl. Do you want to give people a brief, I guess, teaser for pterodactyl before we
Yeah.
call it?
So Pterodactyl is a some open source software that me and some of my friends work on,
Right.
and basically it's a Laravel app that lets you manage like video game servers with Docker and I guess just Docker. Yeah. um,
Right.
and so it's been I think the guy who started it, his name's Dane, and he started working on it I think like 5 years ago,
Right.
and basically, it was this like Laravel app with a Node.js daemon, and
Yeah.
that was cool. But like the Node daemon kept getting messy because people were like they'd have to install Node on their server and try and figure out how
Right.
that works, and it was just a nightmare. Um,
Someone
and
in our chat
so
just said, "Wait, you're the pterodactyl guy."
oh, Shadow, I see Shadow in the chat there. He works on Pterodactyl too.
Cool. Yeah. Shadow managed to
Um,
get himself banned. Sorry, Shadow. Thank you for
someone
posting that
didn't
link.
join at the beginning of the stream when I told him I was starting. Otherwise, he would
Yeah.
have heard the warning.
Yeah.
Um, And so what's cool is we just released 1.0 where it's still a Laravel app for like the control panel, but now the daemon is actually Go is built in Go. And
Right.
so the daemon for managing like the Docker stuff and everything is just one, binary that you can just run on your server.
Cool.
And Pterodactyl's cool because it supports like multiple nodes. So you can have
Yeah.
like your one panel and you can control like, 10, 20 different nodes, and you can have any number of actual like containers or game servers running on those nodes. And so there's like, huge hosting companies actually
Yeah.
using Pterodactyl for video game servers.
That's awesome.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
So we
I'm
can
particularly excited
talk
about
about
this
it then.
because, yeah, I think like I've kind of given this impression as we've got along, but like video game server hosting is like literally what got me into like programming and computer
That's
science.
awesome.
Like, yeah, like Gary's mod and both Lua programming for Gary's mod itself, but also messing around and trying to make the server run reasonably, and then like the PHP BB forum for our clan. So
Oh yeah,
I
you
was
always
so
had to have the
excited. Yeah,
forum. Like,
yeah,
could you
for
really do
sure.
anything without having the forum for it? I don't
It's
think. I
pointless,
don't think
right?
you could
Yeah.
do it. Yeah.
Nothing's official unless it has a forum. Nowadays, it's domain
Exactly.
name. Then it was like you needed a forum. So
Yeah.
when you
Right.
sent me Pterodactyl, I was like, oh yes, this looks amazing, and I can't
Nice.
wait to get some Gary's mod servers up behind Pterodactyl. So yeah, we'll be doing that Monday. It'll be this time, so it's the same slot on Monday. It'll be on our schedule. And I'll make sure I do some shout outs towards the end of next week as well. So wonderful. If folks want to get in touch with you about anything we've spoken about today, I'll continue draining you for cool career stories. Where's the best place for folks to reach out?
Yeah, just hit me up on Twitter. It's at
Cool.
Arc Digital, ARC Digital.
There you go.
You can follow me on Twitch if you want. Sometimes I stream DJing, sometimes I stream programming.
Nice.
Haven't
And
streamed in a
that's
few
also
months,
Arc Digital.
yeah,
Cool.
both are Arc Digital.
Wicked. Awesome.
Yeah.
Brad. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, and we'll see you again next Monday. I'll do the backstage shuffle now and wrap up the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Catch you later. Alrighty, thank you again, Anand. That was awesome, and thank you all for being here. Thank you to Skylancer and the rest of Anand's Pterodactyl, and I think we also had some earlier HashiCorp powers jumping in as well. Thank you all for being here. A couple of reminders. If you want notifications when we go live, we're going 3 times a day throughout October for Hacktoberfest. You can follow our channel, hit the little heart, and then to get those notifications, hit the little bell. We do love a follow. It does help us out. Thank you very much. If you want to see the rest of our schedule for the week is already up and running at twitch.tv raisdev. Sorry, that's the wrong link. There we go. Twitch.tv raisdev schedule. That will currently show the schedule for the rest of the week. Let me give you a little spoiler of what we've got coming up for the rest of this week. So tomorrow is a very exciting day. Lots of wonderful people that I'm really excited to chat with. Tomorrow's kind of what I'm calling the unofficial Twilio day. This was completely accidental. When we book guests on the show, as Anand knows, we send them a Calendly link and they get to choose the day. And so tomorrow we've got Layla Porter from Twilio in the morning. And then this slot in the evening, we've got Lizzie Siegel, also from Twilio. So tomorrow's the Twilio day. And in between, we've got Wilhelm Klopp. Wilhelm was on the show when we first started running this thing. Me and Wilhelm have worked together for a long time. Wilhelm is currently, he runs his own business based on he built a Slack plugin that kind of grew and grew until it's now his full-time job. And so we spoke about that last time on the show. We're going to be tuning a little bit of those discussions tomorrow, but we're also going to jump around, dive into some old code, just in general have a good time. So that's tomorrow, Layla Porter in the morning, Wilhelm Klopp in the mid slot, and then Lizzie in the afternoon or in the evening. Thursday, we've got Juan Pablo Flores from GitHub, who I believe he's currently on another live stream right now, actually, while this has been running. Juan is on the education team, and we're going to be doing something quite cool tomorrow. So GitHub Education did a stream for all of the students who were unable to go to their graduation ceremonies over summer because of COVID. So they did a virtual graduation where, as a student, you could submit a pull request to a repository to sign the yearbook, and then they used that to generate a Twitch stream, which was the graduation ceremony. So Juan's gonna be walking us through that tomorrow, which I'm really excited to see. And in the evening, we have Gregor Martinez, who is a freelance software developer, but also works on GitHub stuff, and Snowpack. But tomorrow we're going to be doing a little bit of a maintainer show and tell, but also a little bit of something we call changes requested, where Gregor's going to show us the OctoKit repo. So that's the official API wrapper for the GitHub API. But then he's going to live review some pull requests on that repo for us. So you get to see a little bit inside the maintainer's head, how they think about reviewing your pull requests, especially useful during Hacktoberfest. And also, this is a really cool project. OctoKit is... and Gregor completely overhauled OctoKit. So when he joined GitHub to work on this, OctoKit was like... only one of the OctoKits was really in a good state, and the JavaScript one in particular had been like superseded by a community version because the official one had kind of fallen behind. So thanks, Anand. So Gregor jumped in and really overhauled that, and now it's super cool. So excited to talk about that on Thursday. And then Friday, I'll cover more of this later in the week, but Friday we've got PJ Haggerty, Shai Rupar from Contentful, and Frida Casas, an alumni of Raise.dev, where we'll be covering Frida's journey through how Frida career changed into software development and how they learned from Raise.dev. So if you're interested in applying for Raise.dev, that'll be a great stream to turn up to, because you'll be able to hear a little bit about what it's like from Frida. So that's everything from me. As the last reminders, our schedule is right here. You can follow us to get those updates live. You can also find us on Twitter, where we tweet an hour before every show, and also every night and every morning. I'm doing the tweet for tomorrow right now. I'm going to hit fire on it now. There we go. So you can follow us at Raise Devs to get those tweets, and we tweet reminders before each show so that you don't miss out. And final reminder that if you are looking to level up in your developer career, whether you're trying to find your first job or you're doing a career change, you're trying to get promotion, you're trying to move from something like software engineering into a senior or a different role, Raise.dev has expert coaches in a variety of topics who we will match you with, and they'll work with you towards your goals. You can apply right now for free whilst we're in early access at Raise.dev. And if you have any questions about that, you can get us at contact@raise.dev, or you can bring them here to the show. We're always happy to answer questions. So yeah, that's everything from me. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attention and for hanging out with us today. And if you join us tomorrow, I look forward to seeing you then. Otherwise, hopefully see you sometime soon. So again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.